Welcome! You're listening to the Uncharted Lancaster podcast, where we explore the hidden histories, forgotten places, and long-buried secrets of Lancaster County. Using modern digital storytelling tools, each episode brings a new piece of local lore to life, revealing the strange, the surprising, and the stories history left behind. Let's begin.
So I want you to imagine driving across a bridge on a warm June night.
Okay, setting the scene. I like it.
Right. So the windows are down, the air is, thick and humid, and you're just enjoying the start of summer. But then suddenly your visibility drops to near zero.
Like almost instantly.
Exactly. Your headlights are reflecting off what looks like a localized blizzard.
Mm-hmm.
Your tires lose traction. You skid to a halt, heart pounding. And when you step out of the car to see what you hit, you aren't standing on ice or snow.
No, you definitely aren't.
No, you are standing ankle deep in millions upon millions of dead insects.
It's a vivid image and an incredibly messy one.
It really is. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a phenomenon that literally forces local Pennsylvania towns to deploy actual heavy-duty snowplows in the middle of summer.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like an apocalyptic scenario straight out of a budget horror movie. But we are actually talking about one of the most vital, ancient biological events on the planet. Right. And welcome to the deep dive, by the way. We have a massive stack of sources today. We've got forensic entomology reports, local civil engineering plans, and, decades of environmental data.
All centered right on the lower Susquehanna River.
Exactly, because if you live near that river or if you're visiting this June, there is an invisible clock ticking down to an annual event locals simply call the Hatch.
It's highly anticipated.
Oh, for sure. And our mission today is to figure out why these bugs are shutting down modern infrastructure, how they navigate, and why, despite the snowplows and the absolute mess, this is actually the greatest environmental news the region has received in decades.
It really requires a complete shift in perspective, I think.
How so?
Well, when we think of a healthy environment, we usually picture a pristine, bubbling brook, right? Green trees, clear water.
Right, like a nature documentary.
Exactly. We don't picture a cloud of insects so dense that it actually registers on weather radar. We really have to recalibrate what ecological resurrection looks like in practice.
That makes total sense. So to understand the swarm, we kind of need to understand the individual insect first. Before digging into the research, I just thought of these things as, generic river bugs that coat your screen door for a weekend.
A lot of people do, but we're looking at the order Ephemeroptera.
The mayfly.
Yes, the mayfly, also known as shadflies, fish flies, drakes. They go by a lot of names.
And the most staggering detail in these sources, at least for me, wasn't the swarm itself. It was the sheer, incomprehensible timeline of their existence.
It's hard to wrap your head around, honestly. We threw the word ancient around a lot, usually referring to things like the Ice Age, maybe 10 or 20,000 years ago.
Right.
But with the mayfly, we are talking about deep geological time. The fossil record for the Ephemeroptera order goes back to the Pennsylvanian subperiod.
Which is, how long ago is that exactly?
That is over 300 million years ago.
300 million years. That is just, paint a picture for us. What was the Earth even like 300 million years ago when the first mayflies were taking flight?
Well, the planet was almost unrecognizable. This was long before the first dinosaurs even evolved.
Wow, before dinosaurs.
Yeah. The continents were still shifting toward the supercontinent of Pangaea. The land was dominated by these massive swampy coal forests, and the oxygen levels in the atmosphere were significantly higher than they are today.
And higher oxygen means bigger bugs.
Exactly. That allowed for giant arthropods. We're talking millipedes the size of cars.
Oh, terrifying.
Yeah, and dragonflies with 2-foot wingspans. But amidst all of that alien megafauna, you had the ancestors of the modern mayfly doing essentially the exact same biological dance they do right now.
So they are basically the ultimate survivors. Like the dinosaurs showed up, ruled for 165 million years, and then got wiped out by an asteroid. And the mayflies just kept on hatching.
Pretty much.
They're the dinosaurs' roommates who just outlived everyone and never moved out.
That's a great way to put it.
Yep.
They survived multiple mass extinction events, including the Permian Triassic extinction.
Which was the really big one, right?
Yeah. Yes. It wiped out over 90% of all marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species. Yet we have these perfect wing impressions preserved in rock from the Permian period showing their abundance.
It's wild.
It is. Their survival strategy is so highly refined that it just hasn't needed a major software update in hundreds of millions of years.
And that strategy led to incredible proliferation. I mean, those sources break down the numbers, and it's huge. There are over 3,000 described species of mayflies worldwide.
Right.
In the United States and Canada alone, we're looking at around 700 distinct species. And just in Pennsylvania, which is kind of the epicenter of our deep dive today, there are at least 175 different species of mayfly.
It is a massive family tree. And with that many species, you naturally see an extreme variance in physical expression.
Oh, the size difference alone is completely... Like on one end, you have North American species like the canis, which are basically microscopic.
Yeah, they're tiny.
The sources say they're about 0.1 inch long.
Mm-hmm.
If one lands on your arm, it literally looks like a piece of ash from a fire.
Right, very easy to miss.
But then you travel to Eastern Europe and you find the Tissa mayfly.
Ah, the Tissa.
Yes.
From the head to the tip of its tail, this insect is almost 5 inches long.
Which is massive for a flying insect today. The emergence of the Tissa mayfly is actually so dramatic that it drives a whole regional economy.
Wait, really? Like bug tourism?
Exactly. Tourists travel from all over the continent, specifically to witness what they call the blooming of the Tissa.
That's incredible.
Which just goes to show that this biological mechanism commands attention regardless of where you are geographically.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's zoom in on their anatomy a bit, because they do have a very distinct look if you actually stop to observe one closely.
They do.
The adult has these massive bulbous compound eyes taking up most of its head and 2 short bristle-like antennae. But the wings are the most striking feature, I think.
Oh, definitely. The wings are iconic.
They have a large triangular front pair and a much smaller rounded hind pair. The sources even mention some species have actually evolved to completely lose that hind pair altogether.
Right. The wing structure is a major defining characteristic. When a mayfly is resting, it holds those wings rigidly upright over its back.
Kind of like a butterfly.
Yes, similar to a butterfly in repose. Those wings are highly membranous, filled with this complex lace-like network of veins. In fact, entomologists map the patterns of those specific veins to identify different species.
Wow, so it's like a fingerprint. And they also have these 2 or 3 incredibly long thread-like tails extending from the abdomen. The sources say the tails can be longer than the entire body of the insect.
Yep, those are crucial for stability, as we'll talk about later.
Okay, but I want to get to the biological detail that completely derailed my understanding of this insect.
I think I know what you're going to say.
It's just so bizarre. When the mayfly enters this final winged adult stage, it does not have a functioning mouth.
Yep.
It does not have a working digestive tract. It literally cannot consume calories.
It's true. Its digestive system is actually filled with air to decrease its specific gravity.
So it's basically a balloon.
Sort of. It makes it lighter for flight. It sacrifices the ability to fuel itself in exchange for sheer aerodynamic efficiency.
Okay, wait. I really need to push back on the evolutionary logic here.
Go for it.
If you are an animal, your primary directive is to stay alive long enough to reproduce. If you can't eat, you are on a rapidly depleting battery. You have maybe 24, 48 hours before you literally starve to death or die of exhaustion.
Exactly. The clock is ticking the second they emerge.
So why would 300 million years of evolution produce an animal that deliberately unplugs its own fuel line right before the most critical moment of its life? It seems counterintuitive.
It does, but it all comes down to the brutal mathematics of biological resource allocation. Evolution does not care about the individual insect having a long, leisurely life.
Right. Evolution only cares about babies.
Exactly. It only cares about the successful transfer of genetic material. Developing a complex digestive tract, a working mouth, stomach, intestines, all those enzymes, requires a massive amount of metabolic energy.
Oh, okay.
And using that system to hunt or forage for food requires time. Plus, it exposes the insect to predators for a much longer period.
So eating is basically just a distraction from mating.
In the mayfly's case, yes, absolutely. The winged adult phase is not the main life of the insect at all. It is simply a biological delivery drum.
A delivery drone. I love that.
Its sole purpose is to carry genetic material from the river to a mate and then right back to the river. By stripping away the digestive system entirely, the insect redirects 100% of its final energy reserves into its reproductive organs and flight muscles.
That is wild.
It's an extreme biological gamble. You trade longevity for a brief, explosive window of maximum reproductive efficiency.
Which explains the name. The name of their order, Ephemeroptera, literally translates from Greek as the short-lived winged ones.
Yes, ephemeral.
But reading through the environmental studies in our stack today, that name is actually a massive misconception, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
It only describes the final 24 hours of a life that actually lasts much, much longer.
Right. The winged stage is just the curtain call. The vast majority of a mayfly's life is entirely aquatic, hidden out of sight at the bottom of a riverbed.
Which is a whole different world.
So let's walk through the mechanics of that aquatic life. The life cycle diagram in these sources is bizarre. It's a 4-stage process.
Yes.
Let's start with stage 1. Stage 1 is the nymph, sometimes referred to as a naiad.
Right, and depending on the specific species and the water temperature, a mayfly will live underwater as a nymph for anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 full years.
2 years submerged in a riverbed.
That's a long time.
The visual diagrams show them looking like these tough little armored tanks. They have 6 legs, and each leg ends in a single sharp claw. I assume that's for anchoring themselves against the river currents.
Precisely. The benthic zone, which is the bottom of the river, is a harsh environment. It's constantly moving. Those claws allow them to cling tightly to smooth stones in fast-moving riffles, or to burrow deep into the silt and mud.
And how do they breathe down there?
They breathe through external gills arranged right along the sides of their abdomen. They constantly flick those gills to generate a microcurrent, which pulls dissolved oxygen out of the surrounding water.
Oh, that's fascinating. And the sheer volume of these nymphs living in the riverbed is just hard to comprehend. The studies show that in a healthy, biologically productive river, you can find up to 1,400 nymphs in a single square foot of surface area.
It's staggering. I mean, visualize a standard 12 by 12-inch floor tile.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Now imagine 1,400 insects living, feeding, and growing within that specific boundary.
That is crowded.
Very. And they're not a monoculture either. In a single gravel riffle, researchers have identified up to 33 distinct species of mayfly nymphs living right on top of each other.
Wow, 33 species just in one little area.
Yes, and each one fills a slightly different micro-niche in the ecosystem. Some are shredders, breaking down dead leaves. Others are scrapers eating algae right off the rocks. And others are actually active predators.
So they really are the hidden engine of the river. And as they eat, they grow, which means they have to shed their exoskeleton. The sources say a single nymph can go through up to 50 molts during its time underwater.
It's a constant cycle of growing and shedding.
But what happens if the environment turns hostile? Say there is a drought and the river level drops, or a really harsh freeze sets in. How does a bottom feeder survive when its habitat collapses?
Well, they utilize a physiological mechanism known as diapause.
Diapause.
Yes. It is often described as a biological pause button, but a much better analogy is a computer going into deep hibernation mode.
Okay, I like that analogy. How does that actually work at a cellular level, though?
So when environmental triggers like a sudden drop in water temperature or a reduction in daylight signal that conditions are worsening, the nymph's endocrine system reacts.
By doing what?
It releases specific hormones. These hormones essentially shut down all active growth and metabolic processing. The insect stops eating. It stops developing. It enters a state of profound suspended animation.
Just totally frozen in time.
Exactly. It requires only a microscopic trickle of energy just to keep its core cells alive. They can remain in diapause for months, outlasting the freeze or the drought.
That's incredible.
And then, when the environmental sensors detect favorable conditions returning, the hormones shift back, the metabolism boots back up, and growth resumes as normal.
It is a brilliant survival mechanism. But eventually, the clock runs out on that underwater phase. They hit their final nymphal molt, and it's time to transition to the surface.
And this is where the life cycle gets incredibly perilous.
Yeah, let's talk about that. We're looking at stage 2 and 3, the emerger and the done.
The biological transition from water to air is just fraught with danger. The mature nymph has to swim upward through the water column or crawl out onto an exposed rock.
Right.
Then the exoskeleton splits down the back, and the first winged iteration of the mayfly pulls itself out.
The sources refer to this first wing stage as the subimago, or the done, and the descriptions make it sound like an absolute nightmare for the insect.
It's a very vulnerable state.
Because they emerge onto the surface of the water, but they can't fly immediately. Their wings are dull, they're opaque, usually tinted gray or yellow, from what the sources say, and they are soaking wet.
Right, they just came out of a river.
Exactly, so they have to literally float there on the surface tension of the water, waiting for their wings to dry in the open air.
They are completely exposed. And in the world of aquatic predation, this is basically ringing a dinner bell.
Fish must love that.
Oh, fish have evolved to recognize the visual silhouette of a struggling dun on the surface. Trout, especially, will position themselves in the current just below emerging mayflies, just picking them off one by one.
It's a buffet.
It is. The dun is racing against time to dry its wings enough to achieve liftoff before it gets eaten.
Assuming it actually survives that gauntlet, the dun finally takes flight. But it doesn't fly far, right?
No, usually it just heads for the closest tree branch or shrub along the riverbank.
And here is where we hit another massive biological anomaly in the life cycle. Stage 4. The dun lands on the branch, rests for a few hours or maybe overnight, and then it molts again. It literally sheds its skin to become the imago, or the spinner.
This is a totally unique phenomenon in nature. Mayflies are the only insects on Earth that molt after they have developed functional flight-capable wings.
I am really struggling with this one. I mean, molting is a dangerous, energy-intensive process.
Highly energy-intensive.
So why go through the terrifying ordeal of emerging on the water, developing wings, flying to a tree to strip out of your skin a second time? What is the evolutionary benefit of that?
It's essentially a two-step optimization process. The subimago, the dun, is a transitional vehicle built specifically to break out of the aquatic exoskeleton and escape the water surface.
Okay.
To do that successfully, it needs to be covered in microscopic hairs that repel water. That's what makes its wings look dull and opaque. It's basically wearing a waterproof survival suit.
Oh, that makes sense.
But that waterproof suit is heavy. It's aerodynamically clunky.
Ah, so the second molt sheds the heavy survival suit.
Precisely. It sheds that water-repellent layer. The insect that emerges from the dun is the spinner, and it is a pure, uncompromised flying machine built solely for mating.
Wow.
The physiological changes are striking. The opaque wings become completely transparent and glassy. The colors of the body sharpen. And most importantly, the front legs of the males lengthen dramatically.
Ones they used to grab the females.
Yes. And the tail filaments grow much longer, too, to provide aerodynamic stability during the mating swarm. Historically, the visual difference between the dun and the spinner was so drastic that early naturalists actually categorized them as completely different species.
That's hilarious. But it sets the stage perfectly for the final act. Stages 5 and 6, the mating dance and the egg deposit. Like you said, if you only have 24 hours of battery life, timing is everything.
You need every single mayfly in the region to synchronize their biological clocks.
And they do this using ambient light, right?
Yes. As the sun begins to set and dusk falls, the males take to the air simultaneously. They form these massive undulating swarms over the river or nearby landmarks.
And the mechanics of the swarm are hypnotic to read about. The males fly upward, pushing forward into whatever slight breeze there is, and then they stop and drift downward, parachuting on those long tails and wings.
Rise and fall, rise and fall.
Right! Thousands of them doing it in perfect unison. It creates this huge visual beacon, and then the females fly straight into the swarm.
It is entirely aerial reproduction. A male will spat a female above him in the swarm. He approaches from below, using those newly elongated front legs, the ones he just developed during that final molt, to reach up and physically grasp her thorax mid-flight.
Talk about precision.
Yeah, they make it right there in the air.
Mm-hmm.
The transfer of genetic material takes only seconds, and then he releases her.
And then the male's job is done, and he will die shortly after. But the female now has an urgent final mission. She has to get her fertilized eggs into the water.
And the methods they use for this are wildly varied depending on the species.
Well, let's get into that. The mechanism of oviposition egg laying, the sources say it's highly specialized.
Oh, very. Some females will fly a few feet above the river and simply drop the eggs like tiny bombs, just letting the current disperse them.
That seems like the most straightforward way, but others are way more aggressive about it.
Definitely.
The sources describe some species that fly low and repeatedly strike the surface of the water with their abdomen, washing a cluster of eggs off with every single impact.
Yes, a very active delivery.
Some species squeeze out two massive, cohesive packets of eggs as they physically crash onto the surface. There are even species that will land on a rock sticking out of the river, physically crawl beneath the rushing water, and glue their eggs to the underside of the stone before the current sweeps them away.
It's an incredible display of instinct, but regardless of the specific mechanism, the physiological toll is absolute.
It's a one-way trip.
Yes. The moment the female exhausts her supply of eggs, her life ends. She falls flat onto the surface of the river with her wings splayed out, becoming what fly fishers call a spent spinner.
She provides a final pulse of protein to the fish below.
Exactly. The entire adult existence, from emergence to death, happens in a single, frantic twilight.
The sheer fatalism of that drop the eggs and die routine is intense. But I did find one fascinating exception in the research. There's always an evolutionary rebel, right?
There really is.
And in this case, it's a species called Chloean cognatum.
Ah, the oviviparous exception. It is a stunning adaptation to unpredictable water environments.
Explain how it works, because it blew my mind. Most mayfly females drop their eggs, and those eggs sit in the riverbed for a few weeks or months before hatching.
Right, where they're exposed to predators, fungal infections, and changing currents.
But the mated female of Chloean cognatum absolutely refuses to drop her eggs. She holds them internally.
She acts as a living incubator.
Yes. She hides in the vegetation along the bank for up to 18 days while the embryos fully develop inside her body.
She provides a completely sheltered, climate-controlled environment for the most vulnerable stage of their development.
And here is the payoff. When she finally senses the time is right, she flies to the water, drops the eggs, and they hatch into nymphs the literal minute they make contact with the river.
It's amazing.
It completely bypasses the vulnerable egg stage in the water.
It is an incredible workaround. It showcases the elasticity of evolution, even within such a rigid framework. An insect that cannot eat and only lives for a brief window nature still finds a way to engineer completely different survival strategies.
Okay, so we have spent the last bit exploring the microscopic biology. We followed the journey of a single ancient insect hitting paws in the mud, molting dozens of times, shedding its own wings, and dancing at dusk.
A very busy life, even if it's short.
Very busy. But we are looking at the Susquehanna River in June today. So we have to shift from the microscopic to the macroscopic. Because when millions or billions of these tiny biological clocks strike midnight simultaneously, it generates a physical event that defies comprehension.
This is the phenomenon of the hatch. It is the moment the microscopic reality of the riverbed becomes a very macroscopic reality for human beings living on the shoreline.
And the dominant species on the lower Susquehanna during this event is Hexagenia bilineata.
Ah, yes. The heavyweights.
Yeah, these are the heavyweights of the mayfly world. They are large, dark, burrowing mayflies that can grow over an inch long. And when they leave the river, they do it with a density that actually alters the physical environment.
To really understand the density, you have to look at the observational data in the sources. Workers at the Conowingo Dam, which is a massive hydroelectric facility spanning the lower river, have documented swarms so thick that human visibility is reduced to mere feet.
Mere feet, like a fog.
Exactly. The workers there compare it to standing inside a hive of swarming honeybees. The physical sound of millions of membranous wings beating and crashing into one another creates a loud, audible hum in the air.
And that density is exactly what meteorologists are picking up.
Right, the radar.
When a weather radar sweeps across the Susquehanna on a warm June night, the radar beam bounces back off these swarms just like it would off heavy precipitation. The meteorologists are literally tracking a biological storm cell made of insects moving across the map.
The sheer volume of biomass in the air is staggering. And when a swarm of that magnitude intersects with human infrastructure, the results are, well, chaotic.
Which brings us to the mayhem of June 2015. This is the incident that put the Susquehanna hatch on international news feeds.
It was a huge story.
Oh, it was everywhere. Let's look at the Veterans Memorial Bridge. It is a large 2-kilometer concrete arch bridge that connects Lancaster and York counties via Route 462.
Right.
On the night of June 13th, a massive swarm of Hexagenia bilineata emerged from the water and aggressively targeted the lights lining this bridge.
The ensuing scene was described by emergency responders as a localized blizzard in the middle of summer.
Drivers crossing the bridge that night suddenly found themselves in zero visibility. The bugs were flying directly into windshields, just caking the glass.
Which is terrifying when you're driving.
Absolutely. But the real danger was on the asphalt itself. The insects were dying and falling to the roadway, creating a layer of biological material several inches deep.
And when you have inches of crushed insect bodies, the oils and fats from their exoskeletons turn the asphalt into an ice rink.
Ew, but yeah.
The friction coefficient of the road drops to near zero.
It was incredibly dangerous. 3 separate motorcycle crashes occurred on the bridge that night because the tires completely lost their grip on the pavement.
It's a miracle no one was severely injured.
Seriously. The situation deteriorated so rapidly that the Lancaster Countywide Communications Supervisor had to unilaterally shut down the entire bridge for 45 minutes on a Sunday night. They just couldn't let any more cars on it. And this wasn't even an isolated event. They had been forced to close the bridge the night before as well.
And the physical cleanup operation, that's where the reality of the biomass transfer truly sets in.
Oh, yeah. They couldn't just sweep it away with a broom.
No, not at all.
The authorities literally had to deploy municipal snowplows. We are talking about heavy-duty trucks with steel blades dropping down to scrape knee-deep piles of decaying bug carcasses off a concrete bridge in 80-degree weather.
I can't even imagine. The smell of decay from the piles sitting in the summer heat was reportedly overpowering.
Unbelievable. Now, when the public sees an event like this, knee-deep piles of bugs shutting down infrastructure, the immediate human reaction is naturally revulsion.
Of course. It looks like a plague.
Right. And it often sparks a lot of local mythology. The sources covered the local rumors, and it is honestly hilarious.
People always try to make sense of the chaotic.
Because when you live in this area, you know that the 3 Mile Island nuclear generating station sits just 50 miles upstream from this bridge.
Ah, yes. The nuclear connection.
So you have an ungodly swarm of mutant-looking giant insects piling up by the millions. Naturally, the local lore claims that these bugs are radioactive freaks, like they're the lingering result of the partial nuclear meltdown that occurred back in 1979.
Which, just to clarify...
Yes, we need to be explicitly clear based on the entomological studies. This is not a radioactive anomaly.
Not at all.
This is a 100% natural, ancient biological process. There is absolutely no radiation involved here. What the public is witnessing is a massive, incredibly efficient engine of biomass transfer.
Let's explain the physics of that transfer for a second. How does a bug swarm act as an energy engine?
Well, think about the 2 years those nymphs spent at the bottom of the river.
Okay, in the mud?
Right. Every single day, they were consuming organic matter, filtering algae, eating detritus. They were taking microscopic energy from the aquatic ecosystem and slowly, steadily storing it in the fats and proteins of their own bodies.
Like tiny batteries charging up?
Yes. The riverbed is a massive battery, charging up billions of these insects over years. And then when the hatch occurs, that entire battery discharges all at once.
Wow.
Billions of mayflies leave the water and take flight. They are literally carrying tons of accumulated river energy up into the terrestrial ecosystem.
So they're delivering river nutrients directly to the land.
Yeah.
Exactly. When they swarm, they become a vital food source for the entire surrounding ecosystem. Bats gorge themselves on them. Birds adapt their feeding patterns for the hatch. Spiders spin massive webs along the shoreline just to catch the stragglers.
And then the ultimate delivery.
Right. When the insects ultimately die and fall to the earth, their decomposing bodies inject a massive dose of nitrogen and phosphorus directly into the shoreline soil, fertilizing the plant life.
It's an energy pump moving life from the depths of the water to the surface of the land.
It really is.
And if you understand the mechanics of that energy pump, it completely reframes the entire phenomenon. It is very easy to look at a snowplow pushing a mountain of dead, smelly bugs and say, this is a nightmare, our town is infested.
Very easy.
But the scientific reality, the ecological why outlined in these reports, turns this horror story into one of the most triumphant, hard-won environmental success stories in modern American history.
It's a true success story. The presence of the mayfly is not a sign of an infestation. It is a direct, undeniable measure of the river's ecological health. Mayflies are what biologists classify as an indicator species.
Right. Why are they the indicator, though? What makes a mayfly a better judge of water quality than, say, a chemical testing kit?
It comes down to their extreme biological sensitivity. The Ephemeroptera order, specifically in the egg and aquatic nymph stages, requires highly specific, pristine conditions to survive.
They're picky.
Very. They require high levels of dissolved oxygen in the water. They cannot tolerate heavy siltation clogging their gills. And they are incredibly vulnerable to chemical runoff, heavy metals, and drastic changes in water temperature.
The research emphasizes that even trace amounts of specific pollutants can be catastrophic for them. The study showed that low levels of agricultural runoff can wipe out up to 80% of a mayfly egg clutch.
80%.
So if the bugs are swarming, the water is pure. If the water turns toxic, the bugs simply vanish.
And for a long time, the indicator was flashing red in this country. A comprehensive 2019 study highlighted in our sources focused heavily on the burrowing mayflies, the hexagenea species we see on the Susquehanna.
And what did they find?
That study documented a decline of more than 50% in burrowing mayfly populations across significant portions of the United States.
A 50% population collapse. That's huge. What was driving that massive die-off across the country?
It was a cascading failure of human impact. The primary culprits were agricultural runoff, loaded with fertilizers, the heavy, unregulated use of synthetic insecticides, and the resulting phenomenon of eutrophication.
Can you walk me through eutrophication? How does fertilizer runoff kill an insect living in the mud?
Sure. So when excess nitrogen and phosphorus from fertilizers wash off a farm and into a river, it acts like steroids for the algae in the water.
Okay.
They get a massive algal bloom. The surface of the river turns green and thick with it. Eventually, that massive blanket of algae dies and sinks to the bottom.
And then it decomposes.
Yes, and as bacteria decompose that dead algae, the decomposition process consumes the dissolved oxygen in the water. It creates a hypoxic zone, a dead zone.
Oh, I see.
The mayfly nymphs, trapped in their burrows in the riverbed, literally suffocate.
That's awful. Which brings us back to the Susquehanna River. The historical data in these sources is just bleak. Before the passage of the Clean Water Act in 1972, the lower Susquehanna was practically an industrial sewer.
It was in a terrible state.
It was choked with raw sewage, acid mine drainage from the coal region, and unregulated industrial waste. The water was so polluted that it could not hold enough dissolved oxygen to support the nymphs. The mayflies were gone. The river was dead.
The silence of the river was the true horror story, really.
Wow, yeah.
The massive return of these swarms, the fact that they are dense enough to shut down bridges today, is a living, flying testament that the water quality of the Susquehanna is drastically on the mend.
It's the result of decades of grinding, unglamorous work. Organizations like the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, local municipalities, and conservation groups spent 50 years upgrading sewage treatment plants.
50 years of consistent effort.
Yeah, they regulated industrial discharge, and they planted riparian buffers along the farmland to stop the fertilizer runoff.
And the ecosystem responded. When the water cleared up, the dissolved oxygen levels returned. The nymphs survived their diapause, and that biomass engine roared back to life.
And this resurrection doesn't just benefit the insects, it echoes up the entire food chain, right?
Oh, completely.
The impact on the fish populations alone is massive. The sources spent a lot of time on the fishing culture in the area, specifically fly fishing. When the hatch happens in midsummer, it is the absolute peak of the fly fishing season. The Susquehanna trout populations just gorge themselves on this all-you-can-eat biological buffet.
The trout become hyper-focused on the mayflies, and the human culture of fly fishing has evolved to mimic this exact biological cycle.
The artistry of the fly tying is incredible to me. Fishermen will sit at workbenches for hours, using thread, feathers, and synthetic fibers to create artificial lures that perfectly mimic the specific stage of the mayfly hatch.
It's a true art form.
They tie-weighted, sinking flies that bounce along the bottom to mimic the aquatic nymphs.
Right.
They tie flies with buoyant materials that sit high on the surface tension, mimicking the vulnerable, opaque duns struggling to dry their wings. And they tie flies with completely splayed-out transparent wings meant to lie dead flat on the water.
Perfectly replicating the spent spinners.
Yes, it's amazing.
It is a profound interaction between human recreation and natural biology. The angler has to read the river, identify exactly which stage of the life cycle the insects are in at that specific hour, and present the corresponding imitation.
That's a lot of pressure on the angler.
It is. But when the mayflies thrive, the fish thrive, and the entire human economy and culture surrounding the river thrives alongside it.
Absolutely. So, we have established that the bugs are an ancient marvel. We've established that their massive, chaotic swarms are a sign of a healed river, and the entire ecosystem relies on their energy transfer.
Yeah.
But that understanding introduces a massive, glaring mystery that the researchers had to solve in Section 5 of our stack today. Let's dig into the fatal attraction.
This is where the story gets really complicated.
Because we know these insects are biologically hardwired by 300 million years of brutal natural selection to drop their fertilized eggs into the rushing water of a river. Their entire genetic legacy depends on it.
Right.
So why on earth were millions of hexagenia ballineata kamikaze bombing the dry, hard asphalt of the Veterans Memorial Bridge? Why were they trying to restock the river by laying their eggs on a state highway?
It is a devastating question, honestly. It exposes a fatal flaw in an ancient navigation system when confronted with modern human infrastructure.
So how did they figure it out?
To unravel this, We have to look at the work of a forensic entomologist, Dr. John Wallace from Millersville University, and his undergraduate researcher, Marisa Macchia.
The local authorities basically brought them in as biological detectives to solve the bridge mystery. What was their methodology?
They applied rigorous scientific observation to the structure. They meticulously collected insect specimens from the roadway. They mapped the swarms.
Okay, standard entomology stuff.
Right. But crucially, they compared the density and behavior of the mayflies on nights when the decorative lights of the bridge were fully illuminated versus nights when the bridge was completely dark.
And what did they find?
Their findings confirmed the existence of a massive artificial evolutionary trap.
To understand the trap, we really have to understand how a mayfly navigates in the dark in the first place. When that massive swarm of males and females takes to the air at dusk, how do they know where the river is?
They navigate using the moon. Specifically, they follow the moonlight reflecting off the surface of the river below them.
Just following the light.
But it is not just the presence of light that guides them. It is the physics of how that light behaves when it hits the water.
The sources emphasize the term polarized light. We really need to break down the physics here. What is the difference between regular moonlight and polarized moonlight?
Well, light travels in waves, right?
Right.
When light is emitted from a source like the sun or reflecting off the moon, those light waves are vibrating in every possible direction. Up, down, left, right, diagonally.
Okay, tiny it everywhere at once.
Yes. That is unpolarized light. It is chaotic. But when that chaotic light hits a flat, smooth, horizontal surface, like a calm section of a river, something physical happens to the light waves.
What happens?
The water surface absorbs the vertical light waves, and it reflects primarily the horizontal light waves.
Oh, so the light bouncing off the river is organized now. It's vibrating in a single horizontal plane.
Exactly. That organized light is horizontally polarized. Now, humans cannot easily see this polarization without wearing specialized sunglasses.
Right, polarized lenses.
Right. But the compound eyes of a mayfly have evolved highly specialized photoreceptors designed specifically to detect horizontally polarized light.
So they see it perfectly.
Yes. To a female mayfly flying in the dark, a glowing ribbon of polarized light below her is the absolute, undeniable visual signature of a safe, moonlit river. It triggers the biological command. Drop your eggs here.
Okay, so if they are looking for polarized moonlight reflecting off water, how does a concrete bridge disrupt that?
It goes back to a human aesthetic choice.
An aesthetic choice.
Yeah. In 2014, the local municipality decided to upgrade the Veterans Memorial Bridge. They installed large, beautiful 1930s-era replica lamps along both sides of the span to highlight the bridge's historical architecture.
I've seen pictures in the sources. They're very pretty lamps.
They are, and these lamps cast a very bright, intense light. But human-made light from a bulb is unpolarized. It is chaotic light vibrating in all directions.
Wait, if the light from the bulb is unpolarized, why are the bugs drawn to the road? Shouldn't they ignore it?
If the light was just shining into the air, they might. But the lamps are shining downward onto the roadway. And here is where the traps snap shut.
Okay.
When that bright, chaotic, unpolarized light hits the dark, smooth surface of the asphalt, or reflects off the shiny painted hoods of the cars driving across the bridge.
The physics of reflection take over.
Exactly.
The asphalt polarizes the streetlights.
Yes. The smooth asphalt absorbs the vertical waves and reflects the horizontal waves. The asphalt mimics the exact physical properties of the water surface.
If I can push back on the biology for a second, I understand the physics of the light, but I struggle with the rigidity of the insect here.
Okay, how so?
If they have been doing this for 300 million years, how has natural selection not weeded out the bugs that get confused by a light bulb? Why haven't they adapted a backup sensory system, like, I don't know, detecting humidity or the sound of the water, to verify they are actually over a river before dropping their eggs?
It's a fair question, but it comes down to the timescale of evolution versus the timescale of human engineering. 300 million years of relying solely on polarized light produced a flawless, hyper-efficient navigation system. There was never an evolutionary pressure to develop a backup system because, for 299 million years, the only thing on Earth that produced a large, flat plane of horizontally polarized light at night was a body of water.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
Asphalt and electric street lamps have only existed for roughly a century. To a mayfly's evolutionary clock, a century is a fraction of a microsecond. They simply haven't had the time to adapt to a world we completely re-engineered overnight.
So the bridge breaks the natural path of moonlight. and creates a massive artificial beacon of polarized light suspended directly above the actual river. The swarm is lured up to the structure.
And the tragedy unfolds. The females, driven by their final biological imperative, look down at the smooth, shiny asphalt. Their ancient photoreceptors register the horizontal polarization. Their brains tell them with absolute certainty that they are hovering over calm water.
And they initiate their specialized oviposition.
Yes.
The drop, deposit, and die routine on concrete.
They dive bomb the road. They strike the surface of the pavement over and over, trying to wash their eggs off. They squeeze out their long, cohesive packets of eggs right onto the dry, hot asphalt. And then, exhausted, they die.
That is just sad. The slick piles of dead insects that caused the motorcycle crashes weren't just an annoyance. They were an ecological tragedy.
A massive one.
Those piles were lost generations. Millions upon millions of fertilized eggs meant to restock the Susquehanna River for the following year were just baked onto the pavement. It is a heartbreaking evolutionary glitch caused by a historical street lamp.
It perfectly illustrates the unintended consequences of modern infrastructure. The engineers who designed those lights wanted to create a beautiful, safe roadway for humans. They had no idea they were building an acoustic optical death trap for a keystone species of the recovering ecosystem below.
But once Dr. Wallace and his team cracked the code, the community was forced to react. Which brings us to the final section of our research today, coexisting with the swarm.
Yes, the mitigation phase.
Because once we understood why the bugs were kamikaze bombing the bridge, ignoring the problem was no longer an option. We are now watching human beings actively alter their multi-million-dollar infrastructure to accommodate an insect that only lives for a single day.
It's quite the turnaround.
And the solutions range from beautifully simple to highly engineered.
Well, the immediate concern was public safety and stopping the ecological waste. The short-term mitigation had to be implemented right away.
Right. And the Columbia Borough Police Department, who manages the local jurisdiction, adopted a remarkably low-tech, brute force solution.
What do?
They just pull the plug.
They just turn it off.
Yes. Every single summer, they preemptively turn off the decorative lights on the Veterans Memorial Bridge. From mid-June until late July, during the absolute peak of the hatch, a major regional bridge just goes completely dark.
It is a blunt but highly effective instrument. By killing the artificial light source, you remove the polarized reflection from the asphalt. The mayflies are no longer blinded by the bridge, allowing them to rely on the natural moonlight reflecting off the actual river below.
The local reports note that this causes quite a bit of confusion for out-of-town drivers, though.
I bet.
You have tourists driving up to this massive historic bridge spanning the Susquehanna River, and it looks closed because it is pitch black. They don't realize that the darkness is a deliberate ecological shield.
A shield that's saving millions of bugs and preventing their minivan from skidding out on a carpet of crushed exoskeletons.
Exactly. But obviously, plunging a major 2-kilometer state highway into total darkness for 6 weeks every summer is not a viable long-term safety solution. So what is the ultimate fix?
The long-term solution is actually an incredible piece of civil engineering. The Pennsylvania Department of Transportation has scheduled a comprehensive $234 million bridge rehabilitation project.
Wow.
It is a massive undertaking set to begin in 2027.
$234 million. And while they are fixing the concrete and the steel, a significant portion of that design budget is explicitly dedicated to solving the mayfly navigation problem.
Yes. Based on the meticulous data provided by the entomologists, the engineering blueprints include completely gutting the current lighting infrastructure.
Okay, so what replaces it?
They are removing the white lamps and installing a highly specialized dual-color LED system.
How does changing the color of the bulb fix the physics of the polarized light reflecting off the asphalt?
It is a matter of manipulating wavelengths and intensity. During the summer hatching season, the new LED system will be programmed to produce a specific yellow or amber-colored light.
And that matters because
the physics of this specific wavelength are crucial. When amber light reflects off the dark asphalt, it scatters differently. It does not produce the intense, cohesive plane of horizontal polarization that bright white light does.
It breaks the optical illusion.
Exactly. The amber wavelength fails to trigger the specific photoreceptors in the mayfly's eyes. They fly over the bridge, the light hits the road, but the bugs don't see the optical signature of a river.
That's brilliant.
They ignore the bridge entirely and continue down to the water.
Yeah.
Then, when the hatching season concludes in late July, the computerized system switches the LEDs back to a standard, warm white light to provide maximum visibility for human drivers during the darker winter months.
I just marvel at the scale of this accommodation. I really do.
It's a huge commitment.
If you are listening to this and wondering why we are going to these lengths, look at what it takes. We are closing a major bridge for years of construction. They already implemented a 10-ton weight restriction back in 2023 that will remain in place until the rehab is done.
Right.
We are inconveniencing thousands of daily commuters, spending hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars, and engineering highly specific photonic wavelengths, in part to politely redirect insect traffic.
It represents a profound evolution in human behavior and environmental management, I think. For the last 2 centuries, humanity's default approach to nature has been dominance. We pave over it, we dump chemicals into it, or we simply ignore it until it dies.
Yeah, that's historically been the playbook.
But the story of the Susquehanna Hatch is a blueprint for what true environmental stewardship looks like in the 21st century.
It's an admission that fixing the environment isn't a one-and-done legislative act.
That is the core takeaway here. Passing the Clean Water Act in 1972 to stop the dumping of raw sewage was step 1. That stopped the bleeding. But step 2 is infinitely more complex.
How so?
Step 2 requires us to look at the human environments we have built and actively retrofit them to coexist with the wild phenomena we just fought so hard to bring back. We broke the river. Then we spent 50 years fixing the river. And now we are obligated to fix our bridge so we don't accidentally decimate the very ecosystem we just saved.
It is a beautifully complicated, ongoing relationship, and that really brings us full circle on our journey today. We started by looking at an insect whose lineage is so staggeringly ancient that it makes the dinosaurs look like a recent passing fad. We explored a brutal, hyper-efficient biology that involves initiating a metabolic shutdown in the mud, molting dozens of times, shedding waterproof wings, and willingly sacrificing the ability to consume food just to guarantee a frantic 24-hour sprint to reproduce.
And we saw how the culmination of that biological sprint translates into an event so massive it appears on meteorological radar, capable of blanketing modern infrastructure in a localized blizzard of biomass.
And we discovered that the chaotic return of that messy, inconvenient swarm is actually a hard-won victory for the entire Susquehanna River basin. It is an ecological victory so precious and fragile that civil engineers are redesigning historical landmarks with specialized amber optics just to ensure the insects make it safely to the water.
It is a narrative that forces us to reevaluate our surroundings. I think it leaves us with an incredibly important provocation regarding how we view the natural world.
Yeah.
Well, human beings spend vast amounts of time, energy, and money trying to sanitize our environment. We want nature to be neat. We want paved paths, manicured lawns, mosquito-free patios, and pristine, sterile parks. We equate cleanliness with health.
Sure, we like things tidy.
But this deep dive reveals a fundamental, undeniable biological truth. True ecological health does not look like a manicured lawn. It looks messy. It looks chaotic. It looks entirely uncontrollable. True health looks like a cloud of 1 billion insects crashing into each other in the humid twilight, functioning exactly as they have for 300 million years.
It is beautiful, necessary chaos. So the next time you find yourself standing by a dark river on a warm summer night, I want you to ask yourself a question. Are you just seeing a calm body of water reflecting the moonlight? Or are you looking at the invisible ticking clock of billions of lives, resting in the mud, waiting for their 24 hours in the sun? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Susquehanna Mayfly Hatch. Keep looking closely, keep embracing the messiness of the natural world, and keep questioning the environment around you. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Uncharted Lancaster podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a rating or review wherever you listen. It really helps more people discover the show. For more fascinating local history, visit unchartedlancaster.com. And if you'd like to go deeper, check out one of Adam Zern's books at unchartedlancaster.com/books. Until next time, keep exploring.